everyone. I am your host, Kanika Henry, and welcome to the Mission Critical Insights webcast series, where we make it our mission to bring you the latest defense trends and provide relevant discussion with our trusted subject matter experts. On today's episode, we are here with the President of Performance Defense, Darren Cummings, and he's our subject matter expert for today. And Darren, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, great. Nice to meet you, Kanika. Again, as Kanika mentioned, my name is Darren Cummings. I'm the President of Performance Defense. I've got about 25 years in network communication technologies, both terrestrial and satellite-based communications. Really big emphasis on dual-use technologies, network resilience, availability, those type of aspects that you'd want to see in an ideal network. Lately, the last 3 years, I've been working on a pretty cool cutting-edge device that its predecessor was used for commercial avionics, but is leveraging some of the high availability 4G, 5G networks in today's environments.
That sounds very interesting and exciting. I would imagine that mission critical solutions takes years to develop, certify, and deploy. You mentioned resilient communications. What exactly is resilient communications, and what does that term fully encompass?
Well, we would need hours to fully answer that question, Kanika, but I'll give you a highlight. Resilience, by definition, just means the ability to overcome a difficult situation. In terms of network, communication paths and things like that, difficult situations can arise in the real world just naturally. Rain has a huge attenuation effect on RF propagation. Foliage, the ability to penetrate leaves and trees and natural obstacles, huge obstacle. But then those are man-made, and then there's unnatural, such as anti-access or anti-denial, like specific targeted ways of, I want you to not communicate. So you have unnatural things working against you, especially in a DoD environment, where these are techniques that our adversary employs specifically to cause us not to be able to communicate, right? So the mantra of the DoD, especially the Special Forces, is move, fire, communicate. And if you take away the ability to communicate, you take away essentially the ability to collect targeting data and things like that. So some of the characteristics of the ideal network, if you will, or the resilient network, would include distribution. So distributed networks have a built-in aspect of redundancy. You're not relying on any one single point of failure, right? So you're distributing that availability out to a broader network. Diversity in network paths, or multipath, they would call that in the term of art, where you got cellular technology, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, both commercial and non-commercial, so both public and private cellular networks. You've got satellite networks, both persistent as well as ad hoc. So, you saw in the Ukraine war recently as an example, dropping in Starlink terminals and instantly changing the game there. You have the ability to protect your network through hardening and network security. You hear things like zero trust networks and hey, this is an untrusted network, but I need to instill a layer of trust on it. So that would be like an example of a zero trust network application. You have encryption. You hear these quantum resistant, encryption techniques and things like that these days. You would have to have some layer of encryption on this, so only the people that you intend these bits and bytes to go to receive the bits and bytes that they're intended to get. Then the question is, how do you know if you are compromised, right? So you need some level of threat detection or advanced threat detection to ensure you even know if you're under attack or have been compromised. So unfortunately, insider threat is a viable threat. You may have bad actors inside your network, so you need to be able to protect against that as well. Finally, if all goes really bad and you find yourself in a situation where you have a compromised network or a challenged network that you need to restore, you need to be able to recover quickly. So, sorry for the long answer, but those are some of the high-level network characteristics that one would say define a resilient network, and especially in something like a DoD operation.
Sure. So resilient communication sounds imperative and pretty much like the cornerstone need of every military branch. Darren, if you don't mind giving some more specific examples and getting into further detail about that.
Sure. I mean, it's a great question, a great point. It's one thing to take sort of a textbook answer of, all these characteristics of an ideal resilient network, right? And then apply those, especially in the DoD force. So especially for the audience here that may not be as familiar with, military environment. We all relate resilient comms, I think, at least by the description we had earlier. We could relate that to our home environment and relate very easily, right? I want to stream, we got kids and TVs streaming multiple things, so I need network and we need diversity and high speed communication paths. But how does that apply to the military? The first thing that comes to mind is would be an MDTF. Are you familiar with that term?
I am not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So an MDTF is a multi-domain task force.
Mm-hmm.
MDTF.
Okay.
There's several, that our U.S. Military has. They all have certain areas of operation, responsibility, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally, an MDTF is a combined, joint, integrated force.
Mm-hmm.
So that force is responsible for multi-domains of action to include physical and virtual. So traditional land, sea, air, conventional forces, right? Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines.
Right.
But the addition of two domains that are virtual, and that's cyber
Mm-hmm.
and then space domain. Space being, if you read the news these days, very highly, with all the missile launches and, everybody doing their thing, trying to dominate space. You got commercial environments, SpaceX, and everybody racing to space, and Bezos, and all that. Very, very topical area these days. But from an MDTF's perspective, without resilient communications, you fundamentally could cripple or lack the enablement of speed of mission. Speed of mission. It relies on fundamentals like situational awareness, the decision-making speed. When things happen fast, you got to respond fast. So any challenge to your network, and without the employment of a resilient network, you're risking your speed of mission or the mission itself, the operation, whatever that operation may be. So the MDTF has a lot of responsibility and a lot of things to consider when they go into an environment. For example, it's likely not CONUS, that's continental U.S. It's likely not the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's likely overseas.
Yeah.
It's in a hostile network environment. You're having to leverage indigenous comms, likely, local 3G, 4G, 5G networks, and have to rely on those untrusted networks, possibly. Maybe it's primary, maybe it's secondary, maybe it's a tertiary data path, but you still want to be able to employ this. So then we talked about security earlier, right? How do I make sure that only the people I want to see my data,
Mm-hmm.
even if I am on a hostile network?
Yeah.
Then that you have to consider things like data complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm sending volumes and volumes and volumes of data, but I got only skinny pipes, to send this much data, something's got to give, right? So that's where, you hear the terms of art these days, AI, ML.
Mm-hmm.
AI means
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, everybody knows about it now, right?
Yeah.
Because Tesla, thank you, Elon Musk, and,
Yeah.
and everyone else. Everybody knows AI, and Elon Musk didn't invent AI, but
Right.
he certainly made it very popular these days, right?
Yeah.
Self-driving cars and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can take these types of commercial technologies and enable our warfighting and the lethality associated with that warfighting unit effectively by making decision-making at the edge as much as possible, avoiding those long, arduous, often challenged data paths, sending raw data back to some analyst cell and then trying to send decision back. I mean, you're losing time, and time is of essence,
Yeah.
move, fire, communicate, right?
Yeah,
You've got to move at the speed of mission.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you employ things like AI, ML at the edge,
Mm-hmm.
network diversity, the ability to leverage anything to communicate. Maybe it's a Starlink terminal, well, not to Elon Musk again,
Right.
and some AI, ML at the edge, and make decisions as closest to the edge of action as possible. You are leveraging all the best characteristics of a resilient network towards a real-time mission of an MDTF.
So I would imagine with that level of advanced technology, there would have to be some challenges or gaps even associated with current comm solutions. Darren, in your opinion, what would you say would be some gaps or challenges associated with current comm solutions today?
Right, great question. Man, I've been in this game for over 25 years, Kanika, and
Wow.
I could say, it's this ever-evolving cat and mouse, right? As soon as you innovate one thing, somebody else figures out how to outwit it, and then it's this ever-evolving game, right? So, I mean, the biggest gap that honestly, is human talent. Just training up our our folks, or beginning in STEM, from young to through college and all that. Just having an agile workforce that cares about U.S. national security and being able to innovate and leverage that innovation would be the first thing come to mind. So the gap of workforce development writ large is the first thing. In terms of specific technologies, 5G is the first thing that comes to my mind. Leveraging 5G and the massive opportunity it brings, the massive commercial investment that comes with that. How do you leverage that, though, when you can't necessarily trust it, right? Back, remember the earlier part of our conversation, we talked about the ability to operate in an untrusted environment. We mentioned zero trust networks and examples like that. How do we take that massive opportunity of 5G and gift wrap that to the U.S. warfighters, where I spend a lot of my time, candidly, thinking about how do we do that and some of the product sets that we're creating here at Performance Defense. The second thing that comes top of mind, I guess, just generally the agility at how fast we can transition new innovation into warfighters' hands. Now, that's a big can of worms because, we'll probably have future conversations around broken acquisition cycles. Some of the biggest frustrations I've had in my career personally are having, a widget or a gonculator, as we affectionately call them, just a piece of technology or innovation that the warfighter needs and wants. But then how do you cross this huge bridge of making that happen? And that is that whole acquisition cycle. And we'll probably have a technical session on that later, and it'll be a long one. The third thing that comes top of mind is just the ability to operate at the network edge. We talked about AI and ML and our ability to push decision making closer and closer to where the data, the insights from that data, and the response to those insights needs to be. That to me is another area that I think has a lot of opportunity for innovation and growth. Those, I guess, so workforce development, just the training up a workforce that can innovate. That's kind of an encompassing response, but then specifically 5G agility and operation at the edge would be the first things that I would think of.
Wow, this is very interesting. So, I was just looking at the United States defense budget last year. Yeah, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a guess at how much it was?
The defense budget for last year?
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. If I had to venture a guess, which I'm sure I'll be shocked as well, which is why you're teeing this up for me, put me on the spot, I'll go $500 billion.
Actually, it's $740 billion.
Ouch.
With a B.
Yeah, I was kind of close, I guess. I was, okay, maybe not.
And then listening to our and listening to what our military has developed so far, I mean, I can see why.
Yeah.
So I would also imagine too, there are dozens of commercial solutions that are out there. When a customer is in the market, acquiring for a communication solution, what would be the top 3 to 5 things you'd recommend that they would look for in a system or solution?
So make sure I understand the question right. You're asking if there's a commercial dual-use technology and there's a military customer that wants to acquire that, like what are some of the recommendations I have for what are some of the things that they need to consider?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect.
Yeah.
So this is a great question. I can tell you from a lot of battle wounds and hard knocks
Sure.
in creating a company meant to take technology to that space. Wow, there's a lot of things I had to learn through the School of Hard Knocks, like I mentioned, and some lessons learned. The first that comes to mind are some of the compliance aspects of that. You know, what you think you built according to your standards are going to be much different than what the military compliance standards are. They have a whole standard, set of rules like, hey, that these things shall comply with this, that, and the other thing, right? So if you're not aware of that and you're building a product, or like I mentioned before, a gonculator, you like that term, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
The gonculator or the widget. You better pay attention to some of those compatibility standards and make sure you're not surprised, which are gonna, it's gonna upset both of you. You're gonna have to spend a lot more time and money to get up to those standards, and of course the customer's gonna have to wait. The second thing that comes to mind are the security. We talked about security in terms of the resilience, right? So there are standards, again, related to security that you need to adhere to. One of the products we're developing at Performance Defense is a 5G box. We built that to commercial standards. So one of the things we had to do is go back and map DO 178, DO 254, and security standards, which are under commercial avionics, DO 326. We had to map those over to NIST standards and make sure that we could do the magic rubric, right? Of hey, here's how these standards actually meet or exceed. But that was a big exercise, and it took a lot of time and money and expertise to do that. So that would be another one for sure. I would advise companies to pay attention to. Scalability would be another one. You might have built this for certain scalability, in architecture to meet a certain scale in your commercial market. That may be way different than the market that you're looking at. It could be more or less, right? Yeah. So there are tweaks. Maybe if your scalability mindset when you architected this for millions of end users or devices or whatever, and it's thousands here, there's probably some advantages you could say there. But for sure, that would bring up the fourth model, and that's pricing. If you built this for expecting millions of users and having an app sort of mindset of, hey, $10 per user at a million users, that's your revenue model, but your addressable market is only thousands here. You got to think about that licensing model, that engagement model. Not to mention, your commercial models, like in-app purchases and things that are really vogue today. In the commercial market, they're not going to fly in the military market. Not to mention you have sustainment and all these other things that you're going to have to adhere to when selling to the government customer, right? And that's kind of a natural segue into, I guess, the last one that comes to mind is the cost effectiveness. Their buying standards. There's a whole branch of government dedicated to making sure the government's getting fair and reasonable pricing. So you have to really look at your model, commercial model here, make sure that's something that you can justify to your government customer.
Sure.
Just a handful of things that come top of mind. Having some battle wounds myself from having to take in technology into that domain.
I bet. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That was very insightful.
Sure. Happy to do it.
We have covered a lot of ground in this episode. And as someone who, is not in this field, I learned a ton, and I'm quite positive the audience did too.
Good.
Yeah. It's amazing how much information you can unpack with just one topic of resilient comms. We've learned what resilient communication means in the DoD world, how it applies to MDTFs, the current technological challenges we face, and last but definitely not least, and how to choose the right communication solutions. So it's been a lot.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
It has. Thanks for bearing with me for some of that, by the way.
No, of course. You've been amazing. It has been really good. So this all begs the question, Darren. Okay, what you got cooking? What are some new breakthroughs or any new innovation that you're working on?
The softball. I appreciate that, Kanika.
Yeah.
We are working presently on an Edge 5GX device. That's our name for the product. But fundamentally, what that is a device that provides software definable WAN or SD-WAN capabilities, some AI ML compute capability. We took some commercial technologies and move those into a specific military use case domain. And we're tackling AI, ML, edge compute, SD-WAN, those types of use cases, collections even at the edge, leveraging a small form factor, mission critical, certifiable device. That's what keeps me busy these days.
Yeah, it does.
And up late at night.
Yeah, no, for sure. This has been very great. This has been very insightful, very interesting, and just overall, I'm dumbfounded with how much work you guys are doing and how imperative it is. I do have one more question for you, though. Okay,
Sure.
Last question. If you don't mind, Darren, just telling the viewers and the listeners how they can be able to reach you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Another easy one. Thank you for that. No, wrap up. There. So, easiest way to reach me is on LinkedIn. That's really the best way that we're able to communicate what we're working on. It's a great platform for sharing videos like this one, updates and news and announcements and things like that, product updates, all that kind of stuff. Check back frequently. It should be at the bottom of the page, either my personal LinkedIn or the company Performance Defense LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darren, for your time.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Well, that wraps up our very first episode of Mission Critical Insights webcast series. And thank you guys all for watching, and we will see you again soon.